Where I see the similarity is in the banking industry, they removed the Glass-Steagall Act. Okay, I don't know if you guys know what that is, but that basically is where our deposits at banks was always separate, okay? Where the proprietary, here's that buzzword folks, proprietary, trading by the guys on Wall Street, they didn't have access to our deposits, okay? But when they removed the Glass-Steagall Act, what happened is they combined the banking with investment banking and also with insurance, okay? And then you all know the rest of the story, what happened with the housing debacle, okay? We can recover from that, okay? But we're not going to recover from this hydraulic fracturing, in my opinion, okay? Because of all the, just overall how I see it, that we're just not going to, it's not going to be the same in our lovely township, in Medina Township. It's not going to be the same in the city of Medina. I see a similarity where campaign contributions that I saw that affected the banking industry, where the banks and Fannie and Freddie Mac just decimated the halls of Congress with nonsense, and we had lax banking regulations, okay? And now I see the same similarity with the oil and gas industry. As an example, the injection wells. I was completely shocked at the fact when I found out and read that in Portage County, 161 million gallons of this toxic wastewater was injected into Portage County, into an injection well, okay? Who allowed this to happen was my question to my commissioners and to the people in the township. Who allowed this to happen, okay? Where are the checks and balances? Well, here we go again. When we had the housing debacle, what I saw was where we had the separate bodies of government, where the Fed, the U.S. Treasury Department, the FDIC, they all didn't have to talk to one another. They all weren't held accountable for how much leverage was out there. So then when I asked the question about the injection wells to my commissioners, county commissioners, I got the same nonsense. Whereas the injection wells the permits are given by the federal government. They're not controlled by the state government, okay? So why is it, I asked the question on Monday morning at the commissioners meeting, why is it that the state of Pennsylvania can go ahead and send 50% of their toxic waste to our lovely state and inject it into our ground, okay? Why is this? Okay, why don't they keep it in Pennsylvania? Why can Texas send their stuff here? Okay, and now New York, I asked this question, why is it that right now the senators in New York are putting together legislation to ban injection wells in the state of New York and also in the state of Pennsylvania, okay? Why don't our senators put together a moratorium on injection wells in our state to protect the children and the senior citizens and us from this nonsense that's going to happen shortly? Also, a similarity that I see that's developing are the buzzword proprietary, their proprietary toxic secret mix that they use for the hydraulic fracturing. It's the same nonsense that happened on Wall Street, where they had the proprietary trading models that they used, where they didn't use the right risk assessment. So you hear in all the buzzwords now, oh, we're going to have some risk involved if we're going to extract this natural gas from the ground. Well, I disagree. I think our water and our air and our land there's no risk. You don't take risks with that. I'm appalled that they're going to go ahead and allow this to happen in our state. So I see huge similarities here. And then also, another thing that I see, the hedge funds are supplying the funding to the oil and gas industry, okay, just like they did with the housing debacle, okay? On a separate note, for a little bit of information for people to think about, Chesapeake Energy, they sold a third of their leases for Ohio, okay? They sold a third of their leases to a company called Total, which is located in France. They are the largest nuclear power provider in France. They have 56 nuclear power plants, okay? They don't allow hydrofracking in France. So why are they allowed to come to our lovely state and trash our state? I just don't see it. I just don't understand this. I just want some answers. Another company, Devon Energy, they are also a large owner of the oil and gas leases in our lovely state. They also sold a third of their leases in December of last year to a company called Sinopec. Guess where Sinopec is located? China. My question to all of you, if these two companies, and this is just my opinion, what if these two companies run into problems in the future and they file for bankruptcy? Who's going to own those leases? Just a question that I have, that's all. That's all I want to know. Who's going to own these leases? Okay, these are things we need to find out. Another thing that is very, very important is also the removal of the Clean Water and Drinking Act and the Clean Air Act. It's very similar. It's very, very similar to what happened with the Glass-Steagall Act that was removed. It enabled these guys to come in and just decimate our economy. Same thing. They removed the Clean Water and Drinking Act. They're exempt. So I can tell you story upon story of folks throughout the United States where their water has been tainted. And they can't prove it because they don't have X-ray vision. And they also have to supply, they have to do the, they have to use their own money if they want to fight these energy companies. And there's no way they have those deep pockets. These are families, okay? They don't have that kind of resource available to them. And the government's not helping them at all. Mark Mangan is a perfect example of it from Granger County, or Granger Township. So those are just a few things for people to think about. I could talk more about the similarities that I see and how we have the separate bodies of government that don't answer to one another. And then when you go ask the question, they go ahead and pass the buck and say, well, it's the federal government that controls the permits for the injection wells. Or they took our zoning permits away from us in the township, and now we have to go to the state capitol if we want to find out how to prevent them from drilling in our backyard. It's just not right. This is America. And, you know, I just really love this country, and I just don't want to see anything, you know, happen to the people and the way that we currently, the life that we currently have. And I want to thank you for your time, and that's it.
Okay, we're going to move on to the last of our presentations, and Rhonda Rita's here, and I'll let her introduce herself, and she says her presentation is going to be 45 minutes. So hopefully everyone can stay engaged. We still got a lot of questions. I have probably, I don't know, about 50 questions here, so we still got more time.
Thank you. Good evening. My name is Rhonda Rita, and I have proudly been in the oil and gas business now for almost 25 years. And if you look at most of us that are employed in the oil and gas industry, think about what our job really is. What our job is to provide energy here in this country so that we can have the lights on in this building, so that we can have the computers running, and so that everyone can probably take some sort of vehicle to be here today. Our oil and gas wells, they operate 365 days a year. And there's not a single person, one of us in the industry, that hasn't missed a kid's birthday or a ball game or a holiday because our wells are operating, again, because we have to provide energy to every citizen here in the state of Ohio. That's what our job is. And so when we kind of talk about those pet peeves, Ron, I kind of like how you opened up with that, because I've got a couple too. Number one, I hate the word fracking, okay? That was not a term that you heard up until about 2 years ago. and especially fracking with a K. Why? Because they thought it would be very cute to make it rhyme with other words. Okay, and I'm not going to expand on that. The other pet peeve of mine is when people tell me that we've got increase in guns, increase in rapes, increase in drug use, and you want to try and blame that on the oil and gas industry. That's a pet peeve of mine as well. I can tell you that one of the reasons why you see some of the security here tonight is at my request. Because I don't know at what time it became dangerous for me as somebody in the industry to go out and actually educate, and that's all my organization does. And what I'm here tonight to do is educate you on how we explore, drill, complete, and produce oil and gas here in the state of Ohio. And it's much different than many of our other states. And the one thing that Mike had mentioned was the Stronger Report. The Stronger Report was a state peer review process, as Mike had mentioned. And it ripped apart oil and gas regulations, including hydraulic fracturing here in the state of Ohio. And this was made up of environmental groups. OGAP, as a matter of fact, was present during that critique process. And for Ohio to come out and they say, in the 80,000 wells that have been hydraulically fractured here in the state of Ohio, we have never had a single incident, not one. And for them to come out and say, you know what, Ohio's regulations should be modeled by other oil and gas producing states. The reality is you haven't heard about a lot of emergencies here in Ohio. They have had incidents in other states, and other states need to look to Ohio so that they know how to do it right. So let me get on with my oil and gas 101 with you. And which button kept causing the computer problems? Okay, so don't use that one. Okay. And up, down. There we go. So let's first of all talk about our current energy demands. Why are we even talking about oil and gas in the first place? Hard to believe, but last year Ohio celebrated its 150th anniversary of the first commercial well ever drilled here in the state of Ohio. Since that time, in 150 years, our energy consumption is currently at 100 quadrillion BTUs of energy each year. And as you can see from this chart, oil and gas is currently making up over 60%, followed by coal at 23%, nuclear at 8%, hydro at 3%, and all the renewables today are currently about 3%. Going into less than 2 decades, we're going to go from 100 quadrillion to 124 quadrillion. What you don't see change up here very much is this pie chart, okay? And when I talk about quadrillion, there's 15 zeros, by the way, in a quadrillion, because I was asked that one time, and I didn't know the answer to that. If you think about it, how many of you have a cell phone? Okay, an iPad, an Xbox, we've got electric cars, we've got PlayStations, we've got all these electronics. 20% of our electricity used today is just for computers. So those that want to shut down energy development, I'd like them to be the first ones to shut off their computers and to stop driving cars. Because the reality is, we need all kinds of energy sources. There's not one energy source that satisfies all of our needs. And not every community has the geological gift of oil and gas. And then they need to look at wind and solar. And by the way, to access geothermal, you need to hydraulically fracture the rocks. I always say, if we truly want to be less dependent on foreign energy, then every community that consumes should produce. Every community should. Okay, no one community should be responsible for producing energy. The 2011 statistics are still being brought up. Most people don't realize that we have drilled 274,000 wells in the state of Ohio. That map there shows you where all those wells are located. Currently, as Mike said, we've got over 64,000 active wells. In 2010, we drilled 431. And this is the thing I want people to remember, because this is a huge statistic. 30 years ago, we drilled 6,000 wells in the state of Ohio. We will never drill 6,000 wells again in the state of Ohio again. We had more than 100 drilling rigs running in the state of Ohio. We will have 100 drilling rigs running again. But the difference, as Mike pointed out, is if you think about that horizontal lateral, and you think about the hydraulic fracturing, which took place in each one of those, you're putting one hole in the ground versus 15 to 24, all vertically, that all would have been hydraulically fractured in the same way. So we're reducing the environmental footprint. And in 2010, we produced 78 billion cubic feet of natural gas in this state. And the neat thing about it is almost 100% of that stayed right here in our own backyard. A couple Medina County highlights, and I did leave some fact sheets out there for you. We have drilled over 6,500 wells in Medina County. There's currently 1,307 active wells currently producing crude oil, natural gas right here in Medina County. And last year, you guys produced almost 1 billion cubic feet of natural gas just in Medina County. You didn't hear about a lot of emergencies in Medina County. So why did we start drilling for oil and gas in the first place? Here's your history lesson, and these slides come from the Library of Congress. It's hard to believe, but 150 years ago, whale oil was still the fuel of choice, even in this part of the country. Okay? And I like this picture down here at the bottom. It's a Vanity Fair cartoon dating back to April 20th, 1861, and it was the whales celebrating the discovery of crude oil. So I don't care what anyone says, the oil and gas industry helped save the whales. Early refining, okay, they took this crude oil, literally, over an open bucket, poured it in a bucket, open flame, and they created something that we still use today, and that's called kerosene. It was that kerosene that replaced the whale oil. Now there were companies, a lady by the name of Mabel Williams. She took a frying pan with the crude oil, created a black residue. Mabel Williams' company today is Maybelline. If you think about products we still use today, what is Vaseline? It's pure petroleum jelly. In fact, our oil has a lot of wax and paraffin in it. And it's the very first thing that's scraped off in Ohio crude. Okay, it makes it very, very valuable. Okay, and if you think about all the literature that was out there, think about the copiers that were used, think about the trees that we cut down. And what's interesting is even the ink is carbon black, and all of that comes from crude oil. Okay, again, a lot has changed. Today, this is what refining looks like today. And we do a lot of cracking. So I guess in some views, we are cracking and fracking. Okay, we're cracking the molecules, and we are able to create, as Mike showed you this picture. And I love this picture because I actually got the rights to this from National Geographic. And the reason why I like this photo so much is because this happens to be a Stowe, Ohio family. And it does give you a good idea of all the different products that are refined from crude oil. And in fact, the average person uses 3 gallons of those refined products each day, every one of us in this room. Now, the neat thing about natural gas is natural gas can be used immediately, okay? But prior to coming into your home or business, we will add in a chemical, okay? It's called a mercaptan. We do that intentionally so that you can smell it. Not all chemicals are bad. Natural gas can also be further processed into helium, propane, butanes, pentanes, and other gases that we use every day. And that's why there's many cracking facilities that are very interested in Ohio, because the Utica Shale has dry gas, wet gas, and crude oil. And I'll get into the Utica here in a few minutes. What is petroleum? It is an organic substance. It's old plant and animal life. It died. It was buried underneath the ground. And over millions of years, it was literally covered by different layers of rock and sediment, and it was cooked. And it came out as either a vapor, which is the natural gas, or crude oil. This is Ohio crude oil here, and I've got it floating on water. This is what Ohio oil would look like on water. This came from a well about a half a mile from my house. Okay, I don't have a royalty in that well. Okay, I wish I did. My kids actually earned some extra money, and I literally took a bucket with permission from the oil and gas producer, and they filled these with turkey basters in our office. I would not expose them to something that would be toxic or something that would harm them. Yesterday versus today is going to be what I'm going to try and cover. There's 4 main phases to oil and gas exploration. It is the leasing and exploration. It is the drilling and well construction. It is stimulation and completion, and production. And today many people call this fracking, the whole thing they call it fracking. I was at an event and they were talking about the number of fracking jobs. And I said, no, there's not going to be that many fracking jobs, because that is done by a highly trained petroleum engineer. But, as I'm going to explain later, we are predicting over 200,000 jobs here in the state by 2015. When we talk to where is crude oil and natural gas found, I think it's interesting that most people think that oil and gas is in this big pool underneath the ground, and we simply drill in and there's this big pool, but we actually get it from within the tiny hole spaces of certain rocks. And you can come up and look at these. This is, for example, the Clinton sandstone. There's over 30 different geological formations here in Ohio that currently produce oil and gas. If you think about a sandstone, think of that as like a gigantic sponge. And you know how a sponge has all those little hole spaces in it? Okay, same concept with the sandstone rock, only the crude oil and natural gas and also salt, water, or sometimes it's called brine, or sometimes it's called oil field waste, are trapped inside of these rocks. Our job is to get the oil and gas out of these rock formations. And if I could squeeze this rock, I might get a little bit of oil or gas out of it, but you can't squeeze rocks. Okay? So I will explain hydraulic fracturing here in just a few minutes. The shale, and most water wells are drilled into a shale formation, which is why most water wells, you will have some natural gas naturally occurring in there. The shale is much different, and this is the Utica Shale. Think of this as like a book. And you know how a book has several different pages in it? Same with these rocks, and it's just one layer right on top of another. I've also got some frac sand up here if you want to take a look at it, because if you think about hydraulic fracturing, our job is to take those grains of sand, and the different types of sand does matter, and we have to place them in between each of these layers. Very, very difficult science. So when you get a chance, come up and take a look at those. This here is a, let me see if I did something. Yeah, let me back up here just a second. This is going to be kind of hard because I want to kind of do it this way. It's a little bit easier for me. This, unfortunately, I wish underneath the ground it was straight lines like this, and Mike kind of showed this map, and I just want to expand a little bit more. Here in Ohio, our aquifers, we have great aquifers located very close to the surface. Okay, underneath that we start getting into some sandstones that definitely produce oil and gas. All the way down here is the Marcellus Shale. And so when people call this deep well drilling, it's not deep well drilling, okay? But just so that you know, in this part of the state, you have no Marcellus. It literally pinches off and disappears, okay? Or it's not thick enough that we would be able to get commercial quantities of oil and gas out of it. Now below the Marcellus is the Clinton Sandstone, which is the sample here. And about 70% of our wells are drilled to that. Below that is the Utica Shale. Below that is the Beekmantown Rose Run, all different kinds of geological formations. Again, there's about 30. So when they say deep well drilling, that's not true. This is not deep well drilling for us. We've been drilling through these shale plays for almost 100 years. We've tried to drill these vertically. We've hydraulically fractured them. You just can't open up those pore spaces. So just a little bit more on the geology there. This gives you a, this is now just the Utica Shale. And this is why people are very excited about the Utica Shale, because the Utica Shale is a very thick piece of rock, okay, in certain parts of Ohio, okay, and it also extends over a significant part of Ohio. We will be finally exploring for oil and gas in counties that traditionally those sandstones have existed, but they've been above ground. We need the rocks to be below ground.